Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Matt Moreno. Happy Easter to those who celebrate, but Matt, there wasn't a whole lot of happy for Dodgers fans today, this weekend. I can already see in the comments. Thank you to those joining us live on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook. We appreciate you. There's not positivity there, Matt. There's a lot of pessimism and not optimism.
Yeah, it's definitely doom and gloom 10 games into the season. And I mean, I can understand fans' frustration. Obviously, we're going to get into it. You know, losing, I think, to the Diamondbacks has made this worse than maybe it might be in reality. And again, I don't want to give away too much in our opening. But, you know, like you said, welcome to everybody watching with us now and that who will listen later. Hopefully we'll be able to navigate you guys through some, you know, getting some frustration out. We're going to take questions later and, you know, talk some baseball.
Yeah, I loved it. I got a comment on social media earlier that was like, hey, hopefully we have a show tonight, basically, because we need this. Fans need somewhere to vent. I like to think of this as kind of a group counseling session. So as Matt said, we appreciate those joining us live. We appreciate those listening to the podcast or watching on YouTube after the fact. Here's the plan for today. We're going to talk about where we're at today, this 3-game losing streak the Dodgers are in the midst of. We're going to talk about the bullpen, which is a major concern. We'll talk starting pitching. We'll talk lineup because there are concerns in all of those places. Then I want to ask kind of two questions on the offensive side, maybe on the more positive. One is Will Smith. I want to talk about the situation about Will Smith. Everybody knows how I feel about Will Smith, and he's not playing a lot right now. And there's a bunch of reasons why that is. I want to talk about that. And then lastly, I want to talk about my other guy, James Outman, and ask you, Matt, how sustainable is Babe Outman, as Joe Davis likes to call him? And then we'll get to some questions, as you mentioned. So let's start with just where we are, the obvious. The Dodgers, as we sit here tonight, Matt, on Sunday recording this, they've lost 3 in a row to the Diamondbacks. They're 5-5 on the season. As I was preparing for this, I kind of recognized it isn't so much just that the Dodgers lost 3 in a row. I think there's two pieces of this that maybe are gasoline that are being dumped on the fire. The first is they lost 3 in a row to the Diamondbacks. And while I can sit here today and say the Diamondbacks are actually pretty good, I've got them picked to finish 3rd in the division. I'm not going to say they're a playoff team, but I think they're much better. In most people's minds, the Diamondbacks still suck, and the Dodgers just lost 3 in a row to a team that they think sucks. So that's part one. Part two is the way that it looked. The Dodgers allowed 29 runs in the last 3 games. They did win the first game of the season. We'll point that out. They just lost the last 3. They allowed 29 runs. Kershaw struggles. Syndergaard struggles. Grove struggles. The bullpen struggles. The offense struggles. I think all that, throw it into a blender, and you've got the brand of pessimism.
Sorry, guys. I think we might have just lost Jeff there for a second. Let's see. We'll get him back on here. Give us 1 minute. There we go.
Sorry about that. A little technical difficulties here.
All good.
But we throw all this into a blender, Matt. We've got. I think there's some general reason for pessimism. I don't think it's totally unfair.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, what might be the biggest concern, at least for me, is the bullpen. And, you know, it was a group that I think people were expecting to be strong. And, you know, as much as we sort of talked about, hey, like there might be some regression with Evan Phillips, with Yancy Almonte, maybe type thing, because to expect those guys to sort of be near perfect the way they were last season is not realistic. And, you know, things happen. But I think how many relief pitchers have struggled has been the issue. Yeah. And, you know, it's like we were getting tweets today, like, will any Dodger pitcher, you know, throw a scoreless inning? Like, is anybody capable of doing it? And, you know, like you said, credit to the Diamondbacks. I think we need to, broadly speaking, maybe some fans need to maybe reevaluate how they view them. Like you just said, you know, it's not the Diamondbacks of maybe 5 years ago type thing. This is a team that sort of has kind of been on the rise a little bit the last few years, and they have some young talent. And, you know, whether it was, you know, they were, you know, like the Golden State Warriors ownership group likes to say, you know, they're kind of light years ahead of stuff, whether the Diamondbacks were light years ahead of putting this roster together that, you know, once the MLB's new rules were going to take effect, these guys are perfect to, you know, exploit and take advantage of it. Who knows, or if it's just good timing. It is what it is. And I think I tweeted this. I don't know if it was yesterday, Saturday, or Friday. I said, maybe it's a good thing the Dodgers don't play the Diamondbacks again until August. And now here we are Sunday. They just lost 3 of 4 to them at Chase Field. So, hey, maybe it's a good thing that they're not going to see them again for a while.
Yeah, we did a live show Friday, and people were freaking out after they lost Friday. And I remember looking down and saying they're 5-3 and doing the math and saying, they're first place in the division, and they're on pace for 103 wins. Now, obviously, it's a small sample size. Today, they're on pace for 81 wins. That would be incredibly disappointing. We're going to get into the bullpen and all that here in a second. I'm just curious, Matt, as we sit here 5-5, are you worried about this team? Do you feel dramatically different about this team today? Because obviously we had questions. I think one of the things that some people might say is we have questions, and some of those concerns that we had going into the season maybe are we feel validated to have been concerned. So do you feel dramatically worse about the Dodgers today than you did 2 weeks ago?
Maybe not substantially, but I think definitely a little bit worse than what I thought. And I think a lot of that is, like I said, I anticipated there being some, growing pains or some struggles, if you will. But what's difficult to kind of parse through right now is that it's all sort of happening at once. And so, you kind of do start to wonder is Yancy Almonte is Alex Vesia, is he going to be able to get back to what he was, or is this who he's going to be now? He struggled early in his career. The Dodgers kind of, ironed out some kinks and gotten him pitching better, but is he going to regress a little bit towards what the Marlins had and traded?
Yeah.
You hope not, but you don't necessarily know. And, then you want to look at the offense, Trace Thompson, he had that huge game, and I know everybody was giving you a lot of grief about it. And I'm pretty sure he got a hit on Sunday, but he might only have 4 or 5 hits on the season, and 3 of them are the home runs from that one game. So, there's definitely some concern, but then, I kind of looked back at the schedule from last year. And again, I recognize it's not apples to apples, completely different year, completely different roster, set of circumstances. But, the Dodgers, they won on opening day against the Rockies and then lost the next 2. Yeah. April 25th to 27th, they lost 2 of 3 to these same Diamondbacks out at Chase Field. May 9th to May 11th, they lost 2 of 3 on the road to the Pirates. May 12th to 15th at home, they were on the verge of being swept by the Phillies in a 4-game series until Gavin Lux's walk-off double saved them in the final game. May 30th to June 1st, they were swept at home by the Pirates. And then, June 10th to the 12th, they were swept on the road by the Giants, who the Dodgers now have coming up next. So there are these early season stumbles that happen every year. And then you kind of get to the end of the year, and you more times than not, you don't necessarily remember them.
Yeah.
I think the difference could be this year, though, like we've discussed, is, the Dodgers they don't have a team that is head and shoulders better than everybody else in the division, where, your margin for error, your room to drop these games may hurt you. And I've seen some comments from people, we have a little bit of a Lakers crossover, and you look at some of the games that the Lakers lost, if they had not blown, one game, they're in the actual playoffs instead of needing to worry about the play-in.
Yeah. And hey, speaking of the Lakers were 2-10 to start the season, right? I mean, you want to talk about an absolute dumpster fire and disaster. The Lakers 2 weeks into the season, I think, was a better one there. I do need to say this. Trace Thompson will get no negativity from me today. I live in a state where sports gambling is legalized. We had the Dodgers over 5.5. He comes through with a 2-out single in the 9th to score Will Smith and give the Dodgers 6. So Trace Thompson in my good graces today. Nothing negative about Trace Thompson from me, but we're going to get to it. Let's get into the bullpen. I think that's the place, Matt, where we should start, because that's where everybody else is. If I had asked you to rank, give me the Dodgers relief pitchers that you trust the most, Evan Phillips would be number 1 on that list. And then 2, 3, 4, and 5 would be some combination of Alex Vesia, Yency Almonte, Brusdar Graterol, and Caleb Ferguson. As it stands today, Alex Vesia, 12 ERA. Yency Almonte, 8.1 ERA. Brusdar Graterol, 6.75 ERA. Caleb Ferguson, 4.50 ERA. The whole Dodgers bullpen has been pretty bad, except for Evan Phillips, who does just have 1 strikeout in 3 innings. Our guy, Phil Bickford, as everybody expected, who's turned out to be pretty good. And then Shelby Miller, who, along with Phillips, is the only reliever not to have given up a run. Although I will say this about Shelby Miller. The good, no earned runs and no hits allowed. The bad, 4 walks in 5 innings for Shelby Miller. You look at the Dodgers bullpen, Matt. I can't, it's not a group I trust at the moment. I'm not saying I can't get there eventually, that I don't think I will get there. But as it stands today, if Alex Vesia comes out of the pen, I'm not feeling super confident. Am I wrong for being worried about this group?
No, I think it's definitely fair to be concerned about them, like you said. Kind of the qualifiers right now, and if at come September, if I told you, hey, like Vesia will have it ironed out by September, Almonte will be great by late in the year, you would believe that, and I think probably most people would, right? And so this is kind of the Dave Roberts, one of his favorite, and this isn't necessarily going to go over well with our viewers, but he likes to bet on the back of the baseball cards with a lot of these guys, and so I think you're going to kind of start to hear that as some of these relief pitchers are struggling early in the season. And, maybe it's getting used to the pitch clock. Maybe they didn't necessarily, and as much as they did it during spring training, it is still completely different when now, like, you're in a game where the result actually matters and you have this pitch clock that's been introduced, and nobody has come out and said that that's an issue, and they won't make an excuse for it, I'm sure, but it could be a reality. The other part is, shout out to our guy Blake, who doesn't trust any relief pitcher ever. So, maybe is that a situation here? Yeah, there we go. Blake pumping his fist. Some of that could be at play, with Brusdar. I think I would apply that most to maybe Brusdar Gratterall, because there's been multiple years of kind of some skepticism of, what kind of relief pitcher is he? Can he be a closer? Why isn't he a closer? Why isn't he missing bats? And so eventually, like after 3, 4, 5 years of that, like it's not just, oh, he's just kind of struggling this season or just in a rough stretch right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at this comment right here from TQT08. You guys overrated the pen. Gratterall, huge enigma. Almonte and Phillips don't have a track record. Same with Meller. Vesia, one pitch guy who has little margin for error. Here's how I would respond, because I was high on the bullpen. I predicted a top 3 ERA for this group. I don't know how we could have overrated. Like we were rating them based on large sample sizes of a season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons. The Dodgers bullpen has been a top 3 bullpen every year for the last 4 years. Alex Vesia pitched a ton of innings last year and was great. Evan Phillips pitched a ton of innings last year and was great. Yency Almonte pitched a ton of innings last year and was great. And so rather than now, I might end up being wrong on this, Matt, but when I see someone saying you're overrating the pen, what I would say is more so along the lines of, I think we're overreacting to a small sample size. Like if somebody is kind of going the negative route here and saying this bullpen stinks, you guys are overrating. I would go the opposite way and say 3, 4, 5 innings. I think is maybe we're reacting too much to a small sample size now. And that's not to say, to Blake's point, relievers are volatile. There is a roller coaster with these guys. That's not to say, like, look, Alex Vesia has had bad stretches before. There have been times where he comes in for 2 or 3 days and it's like he can't find the strike zone. He's not missing any bats. And then the other 56 innings he throws for the rest of the season, he's dominant. Yency Almonte, I'll say this, his stuff has still looked good. Almonte of this group, I'm least concerned about because it feels like even against Arizona the other night, he was like 1 or 2 like good plays from his defense away from getting out with the scoreless inning. Instead, it's 2 earned runs because it's like a tough play Muncy can't make, and then a double, and then a double, and all of a sudden things sort of spiral out of control. And so I would say today I'm concerned. I'm still not concerned, Matt, long-term about this group because I think more often than not, these guys are going to figure it out. I don't think Vesia, Almonte, Gratterall, Ferguson, I don't think all 4 of them are going to be really bad all season. I think the Dodgers will find ways internally and externally to fix this bullpen. And there's still a bunch of guys, Matt, who are going to get healthy at some point.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the biggest things there are the odds of all of these guys continuing to struggle throughout the entire season isn't high. And I think we have seen enough from somebody like Evan Phillips to, kind of try, and he's not necessarily included in this list of struggle, but maybe he'll get back to, his strikeout rate will, get back to what is sort of expected of him. I think Vesia, like you alluded to, fans, probably forget he did go through a stretch last season where he was getting hit pretty hard and it wasn't pretty, but the Dodgers, sort of stuck with him and he ironed it out and got back on track. And then I think the other big thing is the Dodgers do have reinforcements coming now. Daniel Hudson, unfortunately, it seems like his knee issue, he can't seem to shake some of the lingering pain after he pitches. And so that's a concern. But if he is able to figure it out, then that's, an experienced arm you're adding. I would throw Blake Trinan into that group as well. Obviously, he's coming off a significant surgery. And so he is definitely a question mark. But if he's anything close to what we have seen from him, that shores up the bullpen as well.
Yeah. Yeah, Alex Reyes due back eventually at some point. JP Fireeisen as the season goes on as well. I'm curious, Matt. I'm going to throw up one question here from Victor over on Facebook. Do you think it's a timing problem with the bullpen and the new clock rule? Like, do you think the Dodgers bullpen struggling is related to the new rules? Somebody else mentioned that maybe the shift, that the Dodgers were more dependent upon the shift than other teams. Do you think that's the reason here, or do you think it's just coincidence?
I mean, I think it could be a partly to blame, but I'm not sure that that's the main factor. I mean, it could just be that they're struggling, just flat out. Like
Yeah.
they may not have a feel for it. I mean, hitters talk about it all the time. Clayton Kershaw, a Hall of Famer, one start he's lights out, and the next start he could give up 3-4 runs and sort of look human. Like it just happens. And I think, like you said, the biggest thing is I think there is reason enough to trust the majority of these guys in the bullpen that they'll get it figured out over the course of a long season. Now, it is difficult. I recognize right now to look out into September, late September, and say, okay, yes, I have full confidence that Vesia will be fine by then, because we're living in the moment right now and we can only sort of judge them off of what we've seen. And admittedly, it hasn't been pretty. And like I said, the Diamondbacks, in some sense, were almost like the worst matchup for the Dodgers because they're exploiting all the new rules and they're just kind of a team on the rise. And one of their young players today said, it was a different feeling because the Diamondbacks are finally like kind of competing with the Dodgers and have the Dodgers on their heels a little bit, which I think is fair.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'll be curious to see how this plays out. Give me a larger sample size. We'll see. I tend to think the rules aren't the deal. Everybody's dealing with the rules. Like, why are our relievers the ones that are struggling if it's the same rules for everybody else? So we'll see. Let's talk starting pitching briefly in this 3-game stretch. That's been one of the storylines. Clayton Kershaw struggles on Friday, 6 innings, 4 earned. Briefly, I'm not worried at all about Clayton Kershaw. I imagine you and I are in the same boat on that one.
Yeah, I mean, not too much. That start was looking better than it would have been. And I mean, you can't erase, obviously, the back-to-back home runs, but that is what kind of soured his outing. And Chase Field, like, he's just never really that good there for, whatever reason.
Yeah, it's the next two guys that I think are more maybe, you got to scratch your head, pause a little bit and say, what are we going to do here? Noah Syndergaard was second, 4 innings, 6 earned runs for him. This is a guy coming out of spring. I think lots of people had lots of concerns with Syndergaard. He pitches really, really well in his first start of the season. He struggles in his second. As you sit here today, Matt, which Noah Syndergaard do you tend to believe is more real than the other? Is it the guy who was really good in his first start or the guy who was kind of a mess in his second start?
I think he's somewhere in the middle. And I think with that, you're going to get sort of these roller coaster outings where he's, looks borderline dominant one time and the next time he's, getting knocked around a little bit. And I think, it is sort of to be expected in reality, he's the Dodgers' 5th starter. Like if Tony Gonsolin had been healthy, once Tony Gonsolin is healthy and back in the rotation, Syndergaard's your number 5 starter. And so that's, the Dodgers have been fortunate to kind of avoid this pitfall because of just their rich history of drafting and just signing pitchers, just having strong pitching. But he is kind of a prototypical number 5 starter at this point. And he's signed to a 1-year contract. Obviously they had much better luck with Tyler Anderson last year, and maybe even Andrew Heaney, if you want to throw him in there as well. But yeah, I mean, I think with Syndergaard, you're just going to have to, it's not what people want to hear, but I think you just have to kind of prepare yourself for a roller coaster.
I got to pause real quick. We got to stop the slander here, Matt. THP said, Matt said in the middle, bingo card scratch off there. Come on, it's not Scott here, okay? Scott's the guy who doesn't have any opinions and sits on the fence, all right? We don't have to group Matt in with the rest of these guys, all right? I just had to pause and defend my guy here for a second. I said it coming out of spring. I mean, Syndergaard, the thing he had going for him was control. And he wasn't walking a lot of guys, and the strikeouts were kind of whatever. But his ability to throw strikes, I think, was the key. Clearly that wasn't helping his cause this week. So yeah, I mean, I don't think he's as good as he was in his first start. He wasn't as bad as he was in his second start. I think if Syndergaard ends up with like a 4.5 ERA, you kind of live with it. And I think that's ultimately where this is going to end. The third starter was today. Go ahead real quick.
Sorry, really quick. Another thing too is you also, even with Kershaw, like you need to factor in these guys are making back-to-back starts against the same team. And 99.9% of people in baseball will tell you the more familiarity, the more times the hitters see a pitcher, it favors the hitter. And so, that needs to be baked into this as well.
Yeah, it's a great point. The third starter today was Michael Grove. And look, Michael Grove, friend of the show, guy that I like personally, super good dude. He was really rough today. 3 1/3 innings. He goes for 9 earned runs. I think because of what happened the 2 days before, the Dodgers just left him out there to die a little bit. I joked with you before we came on. He's got like a 14.5 ERA now, and it takes a while to scrub 9 earned runs off your record. I think in the first game, you could make some case that he was really good for 4 innings. The 5th inning, he gets robbed. If he gets to strike him out, throw him out, he probably goes 5 innings scoreless, and everybody's talking about him differently. Even today, he gave up a ton of contact, wasn't missing a ton of bats, but it did feel like there were some seeing eye singles, some weird against the shift type stuff, guys in the outfield, James Outman not making a great play from center field, that kind of thing. So it felt like it wasn't as bad as the box score ultimately looked like, but I can't defend it and say it wasn't bad at all. Grove, we see, again, kind of like Syndergaard. I would say really good in start number 1, really bad in start number 2. He came in with lower expectations, maybe than Noah Syndergaard, but is this like, does this sort of cement maybe who many people say Michael Grove is, which is at best the Mitch White, Ross Stripling type, and at worst, maybe less than that?
I think that could be fair, but I don't necessarily, and I'm not necessarily making that call based off solely this start.
Yeah.
I think, he didn't have his best stuff. And honestly, like you got to today, like Diamondbacks, they're a buzzsaw basically at this point. They have won back-to-back games against the Dodgers. They're playing at home. They have some momentum. I think Grove is a serviceable, I think, somebody commented in here, long reliever / spot starter. I think that's fair. I think definitely a spot starter is probably what his role is. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I think he can be, I could see this getting to a point where I would maybe feel a little bit more comfortable with maybe Michael Grove starting than Noah Syndergaard, depending on how he kind of progresses through the season. And one issue, not to direct the answer back to the Syndergaard topic, but one issue is, he continues to bring up that he's trying to, get comfortable with his delivery and a lot of stuff like that. And it's like, well, that's a little concerning because now here we are in the season. Like if you keep struggling with your delivery, it could be trouble. Whereas with Grove, I think it might be easier to just say, hey, like, I have better feel or better command of my pitches this next time out and just make adjustments and stuff like that.
Yeah. And look, a lot of people in the chat saying, hey, bring Gavin Stone up. I'm guessing most of you haven't seen Gavin Stone's stats so far from this year. He's got an 8.22 ERA in AAA. That's not me saying Gavin Stone stinks. I think Gavin Stone's really good. If they called him up, I'm sure he would be fine. It's just easy to overreact to Michael Grove sitting in front of you and say, go bring the other guy up without actually going and seeing that Gavin Stone had a really rough opening day start at AAA. Again, I'm not using that as a knock against Gavin Stone. I'm saying if you want to apply the just blanket look at his ERA to Michael Grove, then we've got to apply that down the road to Gavin Stone as well. And Gavin Stone was doing it at AAA and not at the major league level. So I'm a defender of Grove. Again, I think there was a little bit of bad luck. I think he got left out there to die a little bit. This very easily could have been a 3-inning, 4 earned run game. And then I think we're talking about it very differently. Instead, I think he gets some bad luck defensively. I think he gets left out there a little bit longer than he should have been. And all of a sudden, it's 9 earned runs. Let's talk briefly about the offense. Then we'll get to Will Smith and James Outman and kind of the situations and circumstances surrounding them. Offensively, look, we knew there were going to be questions. What's interesting, Matt, is that a lot of the questions we thought we were going to have about James Outman and Miguel Vargas haven't been questions. It's a lot of the other guys. And the problem has been the 5 through 9 spot in the Dodgers order has been an absolute black hole. And it's hard to string innings together when that's the case. Let me rattle off some numbers for you. Austin Barnes, 11 at-bats this season, 0 hits and 0 walks. Miguel Rojas hitting 118. Max Muncy hitting 121. David Peralta hitting 174. He was batting third today, hitting 174. Chris Taylor didn't play today, hitting 125. That's 5 guys who aren't all everyday starters, but Rojas, Muncy, Peralta are pretty much everyday starters. Chris Taylor is the other half of the platoon with David Peralta. So I just gave you 3 everyday starters, and apparently Austin Barnes is going to play about 40% of the games this year. So that's 3.5 everyday starters, Matt, who are all terrible so far to begin this season. And Austin Barnes has never been good offensively. Miguel Rojas was the 3rd worst offensive player in baseball last year. Max Muncy was bad last year. Chris Taylor was bad last year. And David Peralta is at the tail end. So you could make a compelling case that all 5 of those guys, there's right to have some concern.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like you just said, it's not looking at just the 10 game sample from this year of, some of the inconsistencies or struggles for
Yeah.
some of the players. You know, Chris Taylor, Max Muncy, everybody knows what their story was last year. And even, in some sense, if you want to stretch it back a little bit further, and you wanted to see them get off to, a better start, because at this point, is the 10 games now kind of indicative of what's been going on and a precursor of what's to come? Is it just a difficult
Yeah.
stretch? Like, obviously time will ultimately tell, but right now there's, I think, reason to believe that it could be, unfortunately, a little bit of more of the same that what we've seen from the past year and a half. And like you said, with somebody like Miguel Rojas, like, he's the bat has never been his calling card anyway. So, I know the Dodgers expressed a lot of, and himself expressed a lot of confidence that, he got his wrist healed, and they changed, I think, a few things with his bat path and stuff like that. So they thought it would help, and, maybe it will, but where we are now, like, yeah, it is concerning with the lineup. And what's ironic is, as much as, the 5 through 9 hitters have sort of struggled, the Dodgers, I didn't check it more recently, but going into the weekend, they were still one of the best, like, 2-out hitting teams in baseball. They ranked near the top in a lot of different categories. And, maybe some of that is the lineup eventually turning over to get to, Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman and Will Smith when, he makes his 2 starts a week. But yeah, I mean, it was a rough weekend. And so there is reason for concern right now, I think, because we knew going into the year, like you said at the top of the show, that this team, or like you just said right now, excuse me, this team was going to have questions. The questions have kind of shifted, but that's even more reason for concern, because the guys you thought you could count on aren't necessarily upholding their end of the bargain.
Yeah, and I think a guy like Austin Barnes, who, I'm not picking on here, I think he's sort of emblematic of what we're talking about. The Dodgers lineup historically has been able to weather an Austin Barnes, or maybe even 2 at the bottom. Like, you could look at Austin Barnes, and he was offensively pretty good last year, 104, so basically league average. Prior to that, I mean, historically for his career, this is a guy who's 15 to 20% worse than league average as an offensive player. No power. You just sort of, like, you tolerate, right? So Austin Barnes, historically, it didn't really bother you, because probably the 7 and 8 guys right in front of him were really good. And so even when they bring in Miguel Rojas, I think as Dodgers fans, we're trained like, you know what? He's really good defensively. It'll be fine. Well, today, like, you get to the bottom of the lineup, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's nobody out, and you have Austin Barnes and Miguel Rojas leading off an inning with Mookie Betts right behind him. Like, what do you expect? Exactly what happens. Rojas gets out, Barnes gets out, and now all of a sudden the inning is dead before it's even started. And then you look down, and it's, where's Peralta going to play? Like, if he's batting 7th and Muncy's batting 6th, now all of a sudden your 6, 7, 8, and 9 guys are all 175 and below. That's tough. That's tough to deal with, even if, and like, even with James Outman and Miguel Vargas and Will Smith and Freddie Freeman all producing at elite levels. Like, even Mookie Betts, like, it hasn't been amazing, but you look at the actual numbers, they're really good. They're, like, more than adequate. We're not saying anything about Mookie Betts. The problem is, outside of Betts, Freeman, Smith, Outman, and Vargas, who, by the way, Outman doesn't play every day. So you got 4.5 guys you feel good about, and 4.5 guys that they're not even, like, we're talking about guys that are really struggling. So just when we look down this list, I mean, Austin Barnes, like, do you have what sort of confidence do you have? Like, have you just written off the offense with Austin Barnes and saying, hey, when he's in there, it's for defense, it's for pitch calling, and we're just hoping he, to get like a Cody Bellinger level season out of him? I mean, he's 0 for 11 with no walks right now. It's obviously not going to remain that bad, but, like, if he hits 200, like, are we okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, at least for me, that's where my expectations are for him. And I think, you kind of just hope, kind of like what I said a couple of years ago with Bellinger, like, you need to at least, put the ball in play to give yourself a shot. And, you hope that that's what Barnes is going to be able to do. But yeah, I mean, it's his struggles, some of the other struggles, I think, definitely are highlighted when, like I said a few minutes ago, a lot of the guys that you were expecting to be able to count on all of a sudden aren't. And to your point, not to, sound like a broken record or a parrot or anything, but the Dodgers in the past have been able to withstand, frankly, 2, hitters who really aren't producing very much, because the rest of their lineup was so strong. that's not a luxury this year. And, their bullpen isn't necessarily a luxury right now. And so it just, this weekend, like, really was kind of a melting pot. Like, it was a perfect storm of sort of everything kind of going wrong. And, you saw it in I think 26 or 29 runs, whatever it was that they gave up in
29.
the 3 losses.
Yeah. So real quickly, I mean, Rojas, like, any level of confidence that that's going to become a league average bat at some point this season? Because I'm out on Rojas. Like, I'm like, I've got to see it to believe it. It's not to say it won't happen, but like, we're going to talk about one or two of these other guys that maybe I'm like, I feel good they're going to bounce back at some point. Rojas is not in that category. Austin Barnes is not in that category for me.
I think Rojas can get to league average. I have more confidence in him than I do Barnes.
Okay. Max Muncy, where are you at on Muncy? Still, I mean, he's hitting 121, striking out, leads the team in strikeouts, I believe. But still, I mean, I don't remember where you were at the beginning of the season, if you were a believer that Muncy was going to get back to a level of competency, but where are you at today?
Oh man, this one's tough. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt just because in other years past we've seen him overcome slow starts, and still, like, if you looked at his batting average or whatever, his season stats at the end of the year, they weren't great because the first half was so bad.
Yeah.
But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say I think he does improve and sort of get to the level that the Dodgers are expecting.
Chris Taylor hitting 125 so far this season, 9 strikeouts in 26 plate appearances. Confidence that Chris Taylor, like, any confidence in Chris Taylor?
Not very much. And I think with Chris Taylor, it's a lot of, he has openly said his swing, takes a lot of work to sort of get ironed out and to fix and stuff like that. And so similar to kind of Syndergaard, like, I think when you hear that, it's reason to be concerned because there isn't, like, you're having to do it like kind of on the fly, like as these games are happening. And, maybe something clicks for him. I just think he's going to be a little too streaky.
Okay, last one, David Peralta. Has I look at previous seasons, 2019, 2020, 106 weighted runs created plus, so 6% above league average. 2021, 6% below league average. 2022, 4%. So basically, for the last 4 seasons, he has been a league average player. He's now 35 years old, expected to be platooning. He was your third hitter today. There was an at bat where it was a 3-2 pitch, and I looked like a guy praying for a walk, basically. Are you out on Peralta already? Do you have some confidence the Dodgers can unlock something here?
I mean, I guess, if he's a league average hitting outfielder, that's my expectation. So if you count that as the Dodgers sort of unlocking something, then okay. But if not, I mean, I think, he went the other way for the RBI double, I think, right in the first inning. And so there are some flashes there. The signing always struck me as curious to begin with, just because I didn't know, mainly because he was a left-handed hitting outfielder. The Dodgers have plenty of those. And we haven't even brought up Jason Hayward. Like, if Hayward kind of keeps, if he gets more opportunities and keeps producing, like, Peralta's going to get squeezed out of a job at that point.
Hayward is 4 for 13 with 3 home runs. Trace Thompson is 4 for 15 with 3 home runs. And David Peralta is hitting 174. And all of them are lefties. And all of them are, and you could make a case that that Peralta might be the worst defender of the 3.
Yeah, that's fair. So, I mean, there's reason for concern, but if at the end of the year he turned out to be, a league average hitter, it wouldn't fully shock me.
Yeah. And again, the problem is the Dodgers need more than league average out of these spots when you have a Rojas, a defense first shortstop, and Austin Barnes playing as much as he seems to be playing, and, a Chris Taylor or a Max Muncy that you're sort of carrying along. So that's the concern for me. But as I mentioned, they do have some guys in Hayward and Thompson who have had limited experience and yet 3 home runs apiece in a combined 28 at bats. So something going there. Let's talk, Matt, about, I think, one of the biggest storylines for the Dodgers that has come out of the last few days. It's one that I have talked a lot about on Twitter, if you follow me, and it's Will Smith. And the question is, are the Dodgers making a mistake? There's a typo in there. We'll take that one off. Are the Dodgers making a mistake with Will Smith's playing time right now? If you've been following this story, they've decided that he's not going to be playing every day. We knew that was going to be the case. He caught 100 and I believe it was 6 games last season, but he was able to DH for another 30 or so. As it stands today, here's Will Smith's batting line, just for context. He's hitting 357, .457 on base, .786 slugging percentage. He has 3 doubles, 3 homers, 11 RBIs, and just 3 strikeouts and 28 at-bats. And yet, despite all of that, he played on Tuesday. He was off on Wednesday, played Thursday. The team had a day off. Let me rephrase this. Let me start over. They had a day off Wednesday. He played Thursday. He had the day off Friday. He played Saturday. He was given the day off on Sunday. He's expected to play Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. There will be another day off on Thursday. He will have played 5 times in 9 days, Matt. He's 28 years old. He's the team's 3rd best hitter. I know you can't play catcher a million times in a season. This feels incredibly ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think what has struck me as kind of the most, I fully understand the, not catching a day game after a night game. So
yeah,
I'm okay with that. I think the issue is then if that's the case, he should have played the first, 3 games then against the Diamondbacks. Let him start those 3 if you're then planning to have him off on Sunday. And then, it didn't end up being a full off day because Austin Barnes got tossed for arguing balls and strikes, which
Matt, you better prepare yourself. You better prepare yourself for Will Smith because he played today, not starting one of the 3 games in San Francisco. Yeah. And there's going to be holes in my wall at my house, Matt.
Yeah,
and it's going to be because Austin Barnes got himself ejected 3/4 of the way through a game that was absolutely meaningless and out of hand.
Yeah, on one hand, I can respect Barnes for going to bat for his pitchers. On the other hand, I think you need to. It's obvious, that you're starting because Will Smith is then supposed to be playing the next 3 days. So I think you need to figure out a way to stay in the game. And honestly, if you're Dave Roberts, maybe you need to sort of get involved a little bit quicker there, because I don't know if you saw it happening or saw the replay, but Barnes and the whole plate umpire actually there was some decent back and forth before he got tossed. So it was almost like the umpire was giving him room to say some things, to vent, and then he just ended up crossing the line. But anyway, back to your question. Yeah, the way they've handled Will Smith's playing time is definitely curious in this current stretch. Like I said, I can understand, he's not going to start the day game after a night game. That's something that the Dodgers and probably most other teams, sort of employ as a strategy. But again, I still go back to then play him the first 3 against the Diamondbacks. And, another wrinkle to this is up until this past week, the signing of JD Martinez, that's what I my kind of response to you when we've discussed this is, hey, the Dodgers went and signed JD Martinez, blame Andrew Friedman. Andrew Friedman almost has more to takes more of the blame than Dave Roberts with the way the lineup is even put together. But, JD Martinez is on a nice little hitting streak now. I think he leads the team in extra base hits. And so, it's interesting to see how that's sort of playing out, because it does very much seem like if Will Smith isn't catching, he's just not playing. And
yeah,
that's probably a mistake.
Here's the thing. I'm totally fine with the idea that a guy can't catch 162 games, right? I'm totally fine with a guy not catching a day game after a night game. I'm good with all this. I'm just saying, if you're the Dodgers and you look at the schedule and say, we have a day off Wednesday, and then we have another day off on Thursday. So you have 2 days off. You're only playing, what is that? You play 7 games basically in 7 days. Will Smith should not be sitting 2 of those 7 games, to me. If I'm looking at that, that's the piece to me that doesn't make sense, because now he's sitting 2 out of those 7 and getting off days on either side. Again, he's playing 5 times in 9 days, especially on a team, Matt, as you point out, where he can't play designated hitter because you've got JD Martinez. Now, are we going to get to a point in the season where he's DHing? We sure as heck better get to that point. But as you said, I've got to give JD Martinez some credit. He's got an OPS over 900, which is good. You said it. He leads the team in extra base hits. He has 6 doubles. That's the most on the team. He's got a triple. He's got a homer. He's got 9 RBIs. The guy has been really good, especially of late. And so I'm not here, and especially against lefties, historically, that's who he's crushed. So I'm not here to say JD Martinez sucks. I'm just saying, if you're the Dodgers and you've got 7 games in 9 days, Will Smith can't be sitting out 2 of those on top of the off days that you have, right? Because it's not just how many games has he played. It's how many days has he played in a 9-game stretch. And if you've got 2 built-in off days, then take advantage of that stretch. Let him play 6 out of 7 and give him the Sunday off. Let him play Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday off, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And it's as if he had off days. You get Will Smith's bat in the lineup, and you get the off days on top of it. That's the piece to me that's causing me problems. But Matt, I'll turn all this around and say, if JD Martinez is hitting, and if Austin Barnes is going to catch, let's say 3 games out of every 10, what do you do with Will Smith? Does JD Martinez? I mean, we just talked about Peralta. Do you just take the chance and say, hey, JD, dust off the old glove? We're going to have you limp around out in left field and hope for the best because we need Will Smith's bat in the lineup? Like, I'm starting to believe that's a better option than what they've trotted out there the last few days.
I think it could get to that point if it's July, August, and the Dodgers are in, a heated division race, and Austin Barnes maybe is still sort of scuttling. I think we could see it at that point, but honestly, I'm not anticipating that being something that happens soon. Maybe it happens one time if the Dodgers have, a stretch of 9 or 10 games in a row without a day off. Maybe they figure out a way to do it. They do it once as kind of a one-off just to break things up a little bit, but it's definitely not a strategy that I would expect to see, with any sort of regularity until, maybe late in the year.
I'll say this too. We talk about JD Martinez crushing lefties, right? Like historically, he's much better against lefties than he is righties. So schedule Austin Barnes starts on days when they're facing a righty, when you can more justify Will Smith being the DH, right? Like, I get the Austin Barnes Kershaw thing, sure. But like at some point, you have to be able to look at the big picture and say, does it make sense if Austin Barnes just blindly catching every Kershaw start means that 50% of the time Austin Barnes is catching against a lefty and we can't take JD Martinez out because he's great against lefties? Like, say, hey, timeout this year, 2023. It's a different roster. It's a different offense. It's a different lineup. Kershaw, we're going to let him catch you as much as possible. But at the end of the day, if you're going up there against a righty or if you're going up against a lefty, Will Smith is catching that game because we need JD Martinez's bat. And if not, then we'll flip it around. But at least do it in a way that makes sense. Like, maximize the JD Martinez off days against righties and not just like this, sorry, Austin Barnes is catching every Kershaw day, regardless of who pitching. That's the piece that I think frustrates me the most.
That's fair. And, part of me, and this is, we could go on and on about this one question and angle that I'm going to sort of pose to you is this a byproduct of the Dodgers have done it a certain way for so long, and generally speaking, it's worked because they've won 100+ games every year in a row. And so is it kind of believing in that process, but is it a little bit faulty because, like you just said, this team isn't last year's team. It's not the team from 2 years ago. It's not the 2020 team. Like, things change, pieces change. They're, objectively speaking, they went into 2023 with more question marks than they have in recent years. And it doesn't mean that players can't, maybe outperform expectations or surprise, or that the Dodgers can't be good, but it's a different group. And so, are they potentially getting stuck by or hurt by their strategy, being set because it's what they believe in, it's what has worked.
Yep.
And, you're trying to kind of fit a circle and maybe a peg hole right now.
Yeah. No, you and I
whatever that saying is.
round peg, square peg and a round hole. There you go.
There we go.
We're going to get there eventually. I'm with you. I think this team was so incredibly built the last 4 or 5 years that they were able to get away with. You didn't have to worry too much about the days Austin Barnes was going to catch because, he's a 0 offensively, but it wasn't that big of a deal. And Chris Taylor, you could endure the struggles. Max Muncy, you could endure the struggles because you had Trey Turner and Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman and all those guys at the top of the lineup. I think this year it is different. I think you have to get a little more creative, right? You've got to scrape and scrap a little bit more than maybe you have in years past. You can't just get by on talent alone. You've got to make sure the tactics and the decisions and the roster management is a 10 out of 10. And you're not just taking L's. Like, I think this team historically has said, we can throw out an 80% lineup because our 80% is still better than everyone else's. And if we think that's going to allow this guy to do a little bit better long-term, and it's going to, prevent us from having to have a hard conversation here, whatever, they could do it. 80% this year is just, by all accounts of what we're seeing so far, and maybe this changes, it's not going to cut it. And so the interesting thing, and I'll transition this to the next segment. The interesting thing is, Matt, if you and I had talked 2 weeks ago and I said, hey, Matt, the Dodgers are going to be 5-5. They're going to have tons of questions about the offense. You and I would be sitting here and saying, man, Miguel Vargas must not be cutting it. And this guy, James Outman, must not be cutting it. The irony is the 2 rookies, Matt, are the guys that are crushing it. I want to focus specifically on Outman here. His OPS is over 1,200 right now. He dipped below 300 in the batting average category, but he leads the team in wins above replacement. He has 2 triples, 3 homers, 7 walks in 34 plate appearances. He hit a homer off a lefty. That was the thing that everyone told me he couldn't do. He can't hit lefties because he's a lefty. Nobody's expecting this, right? They keep showing the graphic, highest OPS in first 14 games, and it's like him and Manny Ramirez, and everyone's pointing out Manny had played 16 seasons before that one. This is James Outman as a rookie. Nobody's expecting a 1200 OPS, but do you believe more in James Outman, the offensive player at the major league level? Do you believe more now, or do you still like, this feels fluky to me? Is it all going to come crashing back down to earth?
I don't think it's going to come crashing back down to earth, but I definitely am expecting it to curtail just a little bit. And it's nothing, It's not an indictment on Outman by any means. It happens. Yeah, it happens with everybody. And I mean, if he sustains this level, then hey, like I'll be the first to say I was wrong. I wasn't expecting a rookie to have a crazy OPS for an entire season. But I think what's encouraging is the approach, the at bats, like that stuff is, even if he flies out type thing, like he's not having non-competitive at bats over and over, and maybe he's just run into a string of home runs every night. And for me, we've discussed it too. Like I don't, he got the opportunity against Bumgarner. Like I think Outman the Dodgers don't have a clear cut better option against lefties. So like let James Outman start against left-handers until he can't necessarily hit them at all, if that's what it's going to possibly come to. Because again, like the Dodgers need to kind of get out of this mold of, hey, we're trying to squeeze every possible, advantage, every minute advantage possible, because sometimes like just let an everyday player be an everyday player, right? Like,
just because he's a lefty doesn't mean it's impossible for him to hit off of other lefties.
Right. Like Freddie Freeman does it. And I'm not, obviously Outman needs to put together a strong career to ultimately be in that conversation with Freeman. But like lefties have hit lefties in baseball. It's not like completely unheard of. And so I hope that we see more of that. And, even if he does, regress a little bit, like let him play. Cause honestly, like what other option we rattled through some of the other guys, like it's sort of slim pickings right now.
Hey, let him play against lefties until his at bat quality starts to look like, the guy behind him. The guy behind him's at bat quality. Pick a name of the list that we just said. Obviously, the 1200 OPS isn't going to be sustainable. But I think what you pointed out is what has stood out to me. It's the at bat quality. We knew that there was going to be strikeout numbers, and the strikeout numbers have been there for James Outman. He struck out, at a reasonable rate. He's got 11 strikeouts. That's third on the team and 27 at bats. So that's not a great number. But what I will say about him is he's also got 7 walks. We've seen the at-bat quality be high. And the thing is the StatCast data isn't really there as far as percentile rankings and stuff like that. It feels like this guy crushes the ball every time he's up. And even when it's out, it feels loud. It feels like it's a line drive. It feels like it's a ball that was driven well and squared up and just found somebody. And so what I said all along, and we were kind of joking in our little text thread yesterday, because somebody pointed out, like, are we sure this guy wouldn't have been better than Cody Bellinger? And I said, I have been better than Cody Bellinger last year. And I said, check the receipts, because I was on this show saying all we need from James Outman is to be a league average hitter, to be an upgrade over what the other options were, because we knew the defense was going to be plus. Now, maybe not plus like Cody Bellinger, but it was going to be plus. If James Outman can be like, 15% better than league average, if he could hit 250 with 20 to 25 home runs and play the defense he's going to play, that might not be a guy who ends up being an all-star like it looks like he's going to be now, but it's going to be a guy who's incredibly valuable for the Dodgers and filling a position of need, which is outfield and center field specifically. And so I think for me, if James Outman, I'm not expecting a 1200 OPS. Somebody posted an 850. Look, if he had an 850 OPS at the end of the season, like that would be a holy crap James Outman season. Okay. I'm saying even if it's like an 800 OPS, remember what we're comparing it to. We're comparing it to Cody Bellinger and Chris Taylor and some of the guys that we've seen recently. And so I think it's going to be a 250 batting average, 20 to 25 home runs, and plus defense. And again, that's not Babe Outman, as Joe Davis called him yesterday when he smoked another home run. But I think it's going to be a really positive thing for the Dodgers and a pleasant surprise, because I know there were lots of people that said, I don't know if it's sustainable. I don't know if the offense is going to be there. And I could be very wrong. This could all come crashing down. The scouting report on him could get out. He can't hit breaking balls below the zone. He's going to chase, yada, yada, yada. And that might happen. It very well could. I'm just saying the eye test, what I'm seeing now, along with the numbers, I know you're a big eye test guy, along with the numbers and how hard he's hitting the baseball, it's the at-bat quality that StatCast can't tell you about, as well as the exit velocity that it can. And those two things in tandem, to me, tell me, again, not necessarily a future all-star, but a guy that you can plug in as an everyday starter and feel pretty good about.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing from that is you've come over to the right side of trusting the eyes and not, just saying, oh, stats, this, that, and the other. I'm a big eye test guy, as I'm sure everybody knows. I agree. I mean, look, like I think, even with the strikeouts, I don't feel like there's been a ton of at-bats where I thought, man, like he just chased everything out of the zone, or where, it was completely non-competitive and fully overmatched, excuse me. And yeah, I think give him a shot to keep playing every day. And if he is the numbers, the kind of the 250-ish, 20, 25 home runs, quality defense, Dodgers absolutely will take that from a first-year player.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get to some questions. This is a perfect one. Alleluia one throws it. If you can type question at the beginning of your question in all caps, it'll help me find it as we look through. But Alleluia says, yes, but are those numbers enough for Rookie of the Year in the case of James Outman? I had him finishing ahead of Miguel Vargas in Rookie of the Year voting. That was one of my bold predictions. I actually had Vargas finishing third among Dodger rookies, sort of banking on a Gavin Stone appearance at some point and a really strong season for him. So are those numbers enough? I mean, look, if he hits 250 with 25 home runs, that's definitely going to put him in the thick of the conversation, I would think.
It puts him in the conversation. I don't necessarily think it would be enough to win it, but I mean, frankly, like that's not what great. It would be a great accomplishment for Outman if he is able to win Rookie of the Year, but it's not what he or the Dodgers, I'm sure, are really, truly worried about.
Yeah, fair. All right, getting to some more questions. Throw them in the chat again. THP asks, the Dodgers have 4 hitters in the top 20 in whiff rate in baseball, 2 in the top 10. Concerned yet? Taylor is actually only the 4th highest on the team. Let's play a game. THP, you can tell us if we're wrong here. Matt, can you guess how many of the top 4? So we know Chris Taylor is 4th. Who are the other 3 guys that are in the top 20 in Major League Baseball in whiff rate right now, if you had to guess?
I'll go Max Muncy is 1. I mean, do we need to put Outman in there? We were just talking about his strikeout. I'll put Outman in there. Let's see. And Trace Thompson.
Okay. I was gonna say Trace Thompson and Muncy for sure. And it looks like THP is dropping a hint that a certain designated hitter might be in the top 20 in whiff rate as well. So I guess taking your hint, I'll take JD Martinez, Max Muncy, and Trace Thompson as the 3 guys. Maybe I'm being too high on James Outman, but throw the answer in the chat. I mean, the answer is yes. We're concerned. We talked about all the guys. Thompson isn't qualified there, so maybe Outman.
I wonder about that.
Is the next guy on that list. He does have a decent number of strikeouts as well. So yeah, I mean, I think both of us would say that we're pretty concerned about how things have looked so far offensively, and especially with those guys. Because again, you can handle the whiff rate. Like if you tell me Outman's in the top 20 in whiff rate, I'm not worried about him. Trace would be there if he was. He said, because Outman is hitting the ball hard when he does make contact. The problem is when you have a whiff rate that bad and you like everything else is a mess as well, which it has been in some of those other cases. All right. David asks, should we pump the brakes on what's going on this season, or are we really in trouble? We kind of touched on this at the beginning of the season. I'm not panicked. They're 5-5. They're not 3-7. 5-5 is fine. I think the Diamondbacks are fine. So losing 3 out of 4 to them on the road is baseball. It happens sometimes. I do think there's more concerns than in years past. But if we're comparing this to a 111 win team from a year ago, then yeah, it's going to look worse. I think that's what we're seeing so far. That's my answer. Matt, I think you were more concerned going into the season than I was.
I was definitely more concerned going into the season. And I mean, the 5-5 hasn't necessarily changed. I'm not like more concerned. I'm not any less concerned. It's kind of like, okay, like I expected it to be sort of a bumpy ride. I think it's just looked different than how how they got to the 5-5, like we touched on earlier. It's been a lot of the guys that you were sort of counting on or thinking would, kind of get back on track, and that hasn't been the case. But yeah, I mean, season isn't over by any stretch. I mean, I've also been upfront that I don't think this roster, even before seeing some of their struggles, this roster as put together now is a World Series roster. But I also don't expect this to be the group that the Dodgers take into October.
Yeah, agreed. Lewis asks, do you guys think Friedman is willing to change philosophy on some of the issues that you have discussed? I'll answer this one briefly. I think he will. I also don't think Friedman is going to base a decision off of a 10-game sample size. So I think I can sit here and say, this is what I'm seeing. This is my prediction. But I don't think Andrew Friedman is going to overreact to the sample sizes we're seeing. I do believe he's the type of person that is going to try and find every possible way to make this team better and to help them win. And if it gets to a point in 2 or 3 weeks where he has to sit down and say, hey, Dave, James Outman's your everyday center fielder. And hey, Dave, the Miguel Rojas experiment isn't working. I think he's going to, we got to figure out the Will Smith thing. Like, I think those are all conversations Andrew Friedman's going to have. I don't think he's had to have those conversations in the past because, again, if it marginally hurt the team, it wasn't enough to really impact things in the regular season. I think this year, the marginal impact is going to have a big difference as far as when it comes to wins and losses. That's my answer, Matt.
I think those are all fair takes. I think the Will Smith one, kind of a bigger philosophy issue. I don't see that like really changing significantly until, maybe next season. I think I could very much see them saying, we trusted this would happen. We thought this would happen, and it just didn't.
Yeah. A couple questions here. I'll pick this one. Dave asks, sobering question here. What is Max Muncy's future? I love Max. Max is my guy. I'm not sure he had a future with the Dodgers. Basically a DH. If we want Ohtani, Max has no position. TQT08. What happens if Muncy is minimum Muncy again? Their lack of third base depth is alarming. Where are you at on Muncy? Part of that question is defensively. Can he play third base? And then we've talked a little bit offense. So maybe answer that one. We know he's looked rough, had a couple rough games at third base. Do you think that's representative of who he is, or is that a sort of a blip on the radar?
I don't want to be called Scott again, but I don't think he's as bad as some of the stuff we've seen. But I've very openly have been on here stating, like, I don't get the Max Muncy at third base thing. I think it was sort of shoehorned because of how the Dodgers had their roster constructed, that he kind of had to play there because they were going to give Gavin Lux the opportunities at second base after they signed Freddie Freeman. But like I've brought up and like you've discussed, I think most people anticipated, Muncy himself said, second base is my favorite position. I'll absolutely move there if they, to sign Freddie Freeman. So I think how good of a third baseman Max Muncy can be, I think is a fair question. In terms of how he fits into their roster moving forward, I mean, I think very clearly at third base, because as that question mentioned, the depth there is basically non-existent. So he's going to keep playing there. And if obviously the Dodgers do end up signing Ohtani, then there goes, understandably so, your DH spot is then fully locked up.
Let me ask you this. Why not experiment with flopping Miguel Vargas and Max Muncy defensively? You mentioned Muncy prefers to play second base. Vargas played a lot of third base at the minor league level last year, 631 innings at AAA last year, another 630 innings the year before, split between high A and double A. Vargas has looked good at at second base. So maybe that's kind of the don't mess with it. As far as what the backup plan is, I think it's probably Miguel Vargas, and then a guy like Michael Busch could come up and play second base. So it feels like Vargas is the backup option. Do you think at any point we start to see Muncy and Vargas switch places on defense?
I don't think so. I think, for whatever reason, the Dodgers, like I never got the sense that they fully trusted Vargas at third base. If you look at some of his stuff, some of his playing time last year during his debut, and he wasn't really playing third base. Like I brought up before, like they were looking at trying to get him into the outfield. Like that's how much they didn't necessarily want him at third. And I think because of how well Vargas has taken to second base, I just don't mess with that, at least not this year.
Yeah, fair. Your girl Cassie wants to know, Matt, any updates on Tony the Catman?
Yeah, so Tony Gonsolin faced batters at Camelback Ranch on Wednesday, which was the Dodgers off day. And when Dave Roberts was discussing it, it was a bit ominous. He kind of said, he got through it, which was the most important thing. And then Gonsolin threw a bullpen session after that Robert said was better. He threw the ball better. Things seem to be, kind of trending in the right direction. But again, like he's still not going to be, it's an end of April type situation for Gonsolin.
There you go. Brett, real quick, wants to know, the lineup needs to be reconfigured. Betts not leading off. What do you think? Do you think the Dodgers need to mix things up? Vargas, the on-base percentage, do you get Vargas up higher and give Mookie and Freddie Freeman and Will Smith more opportunities with guys on base?
I don't move Mookie out of the leadoff spot just because I don't think the Dodgers have, even with Vargas's strong on base percentage right now, I don't think the Dodgers have another option who's better than him in the leadoff, hitting leadoff. I could be coaxed into Vargas maybe batting second, because if you put him obviously after Mookie in between, and then Freddie behind Vargas, I think Vargas will get some decent pitches to see. And or if he gets on base, then maybe there's Freeman's coming up with two guys on base. But other than that, like I don't see, again, like when everybody's sort of struggling, like there's only so much you can sort of do. It's kind of just rearranging the deck chairs type thing. But yeah, that's probably the extent of it right now.
Look, you want your best players to have as many at-bats as possible. Trying to mix up the lineup is always a dangerous game. I think what you said at the end is the most important. It's easy to point fingers anywhere and everywhere when a team is struggling. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the lineup. So there we go. This is a great question. The Other Fishing Channel. How does the Dodgers start affect LeBron's legacy, Matt? It's a great question. Hey, Lakers made the play-in game, Matt. How about those Lakers?
Yeah, it's giving fans who are teams of both, an opportunity maybe to pay a little bit more attention to LeBron if they want to check out from some Dodgers stuff, because baseball season is obviously a full, 162. So you could take a little break this week. Still keep reading DodgerBlue.com, please. Yeah. Still keep watching our shorts we're going to have out. But at night, if you choose to tune into the Lakers play-in game instead of watching Dodgers Giants, we won't fully fault you.
Yeah, and maybe we need to get some Lakers level expectations. Like the number of Lakers fans in my life that are like over the moon about making the play-in game. They're not even in the playoffs. If you bet the Lakers to make the playoffs, that bet has not cashed yet, and yet Lakers fans losing their minds. So maybe we need to get some of that level of expectation. I think is a good thing. C-Ras, of the 1-year deals the team made this season, who will be DFA'd first? You've got Syndergaard, you've got JD Martinez, you've got David Peralta. You have one of those guys you like less than the others, Matt?
No, I mean, I guess if you had to pick one, just a numbers game, maybe Shelby Miller, if or when the relief pitchers start to come back. But there's always injuries.
You can't say that about Shelby. Shelby's like the only guy that hasn't given up a run yet.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'm looking at it. Just there's too many bodies in the bullpen, but injuries unfortunately happen, and so people end up on the IL and stuff like that. I know, I don't know if we want to revisit it now, but he doesn't fit this question, but I know you've speculated, is Trace going to be potentially DFA'd if he continues to struggle? Who knows?
Yeah. Who knows is the right answer. I don't think, look, I don't see a world where any of the three guys I just mentioned get DFA'd. I suppose Peralta is the least expensive of the three guys and has played the worst of the three guys, I think you would say. I mean, JD Martinez, I think, has righted the ship. I don't think he belongs in that conversation. I think Syndergaard, I can't imagine a world where he's not on the Dodgers roster where he gets DFA'd. Peralta is probably the closest you could get me, because if he's hitting 200 and you're just looking around and saying, like, really, like keeping this guy around in place of Michael Busch or somebody like that, are we really making sense there? So who knows? But tough question. But, we're here to answer those questions for you. Well, that'll do it for us. We appreciate everybody joining us. We're over the hour mark, but thank you. Thank you again to those joining us live on Facebook, live on YouTube, Dodger Blue 1958 channel. We appreciate you. To those after the fact, watching this on YouTube, listening via the Blue Wire Podcast Network, checking the DodgerHeads podcast out on Apple, Google, or Spotify. Thank you as well. We're very much appreciative of all of you, and we've got tons of content coming your way. I make this announcement every time, but in case you are new, just a reminder, every Tuesday and Friday night, we are live on playback.tv/DodgerBlue1958. It is a live watch party for Dodgers fans. It's a ton of fun. Every Tuesday and Friday night, you can find us there. And then we will be here on the Dodger Blue YouTube page with a live post-game show. You guessed it, every Tuesday night and every Friday night. So make sure to check that out. And then, of course, throughout the week, we've got short videos going up Monday through Friday on the YouTube page as well. As Matt said, tons of great content over on DodgerBlue.com, Dodger Blue 1958 on social media everywhere. So We greatly appreciate it, Matt. Anything in particular? I know we've got tons of great content on the site on YouTube. Any particular things that you would point people to? We got the drone show. If you missed that, that's up on the YouTube. So that's good stuff. We've got, I believe, a review of some food going on in the stadium coming soon to the YouTube page.
Yeah, that one will be up soon. Definitely the drone show. You may have to scroll a little bit through our videos to find that one, but it was the first drone show at Dodger Stadium. We have it fully recorded. We also have kind of a highlight reel, if you will, of the new lights at Dodger Stadium when home runs were hit, when pitching changes were made, stuff like that. So if you haven't seen that in action yet, I would definitely direct you to that video as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, everybody, for watching. We appreciate it. Matt, thanks for hopping on as always. Everybody, enjoy the rest of your night. I know they're 5-5. I know they gave up 29 runs to the Diamondbacks. Let's all take a deep breath. Let's all relax. And of course, say together, go Dodgers.